It was a cold evening in downtown Atlanta. The streets were filled with rushing cars, neon signs flickering above restaurants, and people dressed in suits hurrying home after a long day of work. But among this crowd, there was one boy, standing quietly on the corner of a busy street. His clothes were torn, his shoes barely holding together, and his face looked tired, like he hadn't eaten in days. This boy's name was Malik. He was only 10 years old, but life had already given him battles that most adults never face. Malik had been homeless for months. His mother had passed away the previous year after a long illness. His father? Nobody knew where he was. Some said he left when Malik was just a baby. Others whispered he might be in jail. But for Malik, none of that mattered anymore. He only knew one thing. He was hungry. That night, his stomach growled louder than the city traffic. He looked at the people walking by, men in suits, women with shopping bags, couples laughing after dinner. To them, he was invisible. Just another poor child they pretended not to see. But then, Malik's eyes fell on a man who seemed different. A tall figure stepping out of a shiny black car. A millionaire, though Malik had no idea who he was. Dressed in a sharp-tailored suit, wearing an expensive watch, and looking like someone who had never once known the pain of going hungry. His name was Jonathan Reed, a self-made businessman known across the city as a ruthless negotiator and a man who believed in hard work above all else. Jonathan believed that if you were poor, it was because you didn't try hard enough. To him, success was a choice, and failure was just laziness. And yet, as fate would have it, this was the man Malik decided to approach. Malik stepped forward nervously. His voice was small, almost trembling. "Sir, do you have any food? I haven't eaten in 2 days." Jonathan stopped, surprised that a child had spoken to him this way. He looked down at the boy, dirty clothes, thin arms, eyes filled with desperation. For a moment, Jonathan wanted to walk away. After all, people begged him for money all the time. But something in Malik's eyes made him pause. There was no greed in them, no trickery, no manipulation, just hunger, just pain. Jonathan sighed and shook his head. "Look, kid, I don't give out money like that. You need to learn to work for what you want." Malik's heart sank. He had heard those words before. People always said, "Work hard, earn it yourself." But how could a 10-year-old work? How could he earn food when he didn't even have a home? But instead of crying, Malik looked straight into Jonathan's eyes and whispered, "Sir, I don't want money. I just want to eat. Please, just food." That one sentence stopped Jonathan cold, because it wasn't a demand. It wasn't a trick. It wasn't a scam. It was just the pure, desperate plea of a child who had nothing. Jonathan didn't know why, but he couldn't walk away. He sighed heavily and said, "Fine, come with me." And so, Malik followed him into a nearby restaurant. Inside, the warm air hit Malik's skin. The smell of fresh food filled his senses: fried chicken, hot soup, fresh bread. For a boy who hadn't eaten in 2 days, it was like heaven. The waiter looked at Jonathan with raised eyebrows. It wasn't every day a millionaire walked in with a homeless child. But Jonathan simply ordered 2 meals and sat down. Malik hesitated. He wasn't sure if he should sit across from this powerful man, but Jonathan motioned for him to sit. When the food came, Malik didn't wait. He grabbed the fork and started eating faster than Jonathan had ever seen. Tears filled his eyes as he tasted the hot food. For the first time in weeks, his stomach was full. Jonathan sat quietly, watching. Something strange was happening to him. He had built his fortune believing that the poor were lazy, that the weak had no place in society. But this child was proving him wrong. Finally, Jonathan asked, "Where are your parents?" Malik's fork slowed. His voice cracked as he answered. My mama. She died last year. She was all I had. Jonathan frowned. And your father? Malik looked down, silent. His hands trembled. Finally, he whispered, He left us. I don't know where he is. The millionaire leaned back in his chair. For the first time in years, he didn't know what to say. Malik wiped his mouth and looked up at him with wide, innocent eyes. Sir, thank you. Nobody ever stops to help me. They just look away. Those words pierced Jonathan's heart like a blade. He had always been the one who looked away. But tonight, he couldn't. Something inside him was shifting, something he couldn't explain. As they left the restaurant, Malik looked at Jonathan and said softly, Can I ask you something? Jonathan nodded. Why did you help me? You didn't have to. People like you, they never stop for kids like me. Jonathan froze because he didn't have an answer. For the first time in years, he realized his wealth, his success, his pride. None of it meant anything if he could ignore the suffering of a hungry child. And in that moment, Jonathan Reed, the ruthless millionaire, felt something he hadn't felt in a very long time. Compassion. The night outside was darker now. The streets were quieter, but inside Jonathan's mind, there was noise. He couldn't stop thinking about the boy walking beside him, Malik. A child with no home, no family, no one to care whether he lived or died. Jonathan looked down at him and asked, Where do you sleep at night? Malik hesitated. His lips trembled. Sometimes, under the bridge. Sometimes, behind the bus station. If I'm lucky, I find a shelter. But they're full most of the time. Jonathan's chest tightened. He had never thought about what it meant to sleep under a bridge. He had never thought about what it meant to be 10 years old and alone. For Jonathan, the city had always been a place of opportunity. For Malik, it was a battlefield for survival. And then Malik said something that made Jonathan's blood run cold. The boy whispered, Sometimes I hear footsteps at night, grown men following me. That's when I run the fastest I can. 'Cause if they catch me, Malik's voice broke off. He didn't finish the sentence, but Jonathan didn't need him to. He knew exactly what the boy meant. Jonathan's jaw tightened. For the first time, he felt anger. Not at Malik, but at the cruel world that forced a child to live like this. They kept walking in silence until they reached Jonathan's car. Malik looked at it with wide eyes. The shiny black Mercedes seemed like a spaceship to him. Jonathan opened the door. Get in! Malik froze. Are you taking me to the police? Jonathan shook his head. No, just get in. Inside the car. Malik sat quietly, his small hands pressed against his lap. He was nervous. Cars like this didn't belong to kids like him. They belonged to powerful men in suits, the kind of men who never stopped for homeless boys. But tonight was different. Jonathan drove through the city, not sure where he was even going. For the first time in his life, he didn't have a plan. Finally, Malik whispered, Why are you helping me? Jonathan glanced at him. Because no child should go hungry. Malik's eyes filled with tears. Nobody had ever said that to him before. But little did Jonathan know. Malik's story was about to reveal a truth so heartbreaking that it would test the millionaire's soul in ways he never imagined. They arrived at Jonathan's penthouse apartment. The tall glass building towered above the city, shining like a monument of wealth. As they walked inside, Malik's jaw dropped. He had never seen anything like it. Crystal chandeliers, leather couches, walls of glass showing the city skyline. It was like another world. Jonathan handed him a blanket and a pillow. You can sleep on the couch tonight. You'll be safe here. Malik's eyes widened. Really? You mean nobody will kick me out? Jonathan nodded. No one will touch you here. The boy smiled softly, his face glowing for the first time in months. He curled up on the couch, clutching the blanket like it was the most precious gift in the world. Within minutes, he was asleep. Jonathan stood there, watching. He had built empires. He had made millions. But nothing had ever touched his heart, like seeing this child finally sleep in peace. But then, just as Jonathan turned away, Malik started mumbling in his sleep. His small body shook, his hands clenched the blanket tight. He was having a nightmare. Jonathan leaned closer. Malik's voice trembled as he whispered in his sleep. No, don't hit me, please. I'll be good. I'll be quiet. Jonathan froze. His heart sank. These weren't just random dreams. These were memories. That's when Jonathan realized. Malik's suffering wasn't just about hunger. There was a deeper pain, one that came from the scars of the past, and Jonathan was about to uncover a truth darker than he ever imagined. The next morning, Malik woke up to the smell of breakfast. For the first time in years, someone had cooked for him. Eggs, toast, fruit, simple food. But to Malik, it felt like a feast. Eat, Jonathan said, placing the plate in front of him. Malik ate slowly this time, trying to savor every bite. But his eyes kept darting to the door, as if he was scared someone would burst in and take it all away. Jonathan noticed. Malik, what happened to you before? You ended up on the streets? The boy froze. His fork stopped in midair. For a long moment, he didn't answer. But then, tears began to roll down his cheeks. He whispered, After my mama died, I lived with my uncle. At first, he said he would take care of me. But then, Malik's voice broke. His body trembled. He hurt me. He hurt me so bad. I couldn't stay, so I ran away. Jonathan's hands clenched into fists. His blood boiled. The thought of a man abusing a helpless child was unbearable. Malik, he said, firmly, you don't ever have to go back there. Do you understand me? You're safe now. For the first time in weeks, Malik smiled through his tears. It was small, fragile, but it was hope. Jonathan looked at him and realized something shocking. This boy wasn't just a stranger he had fed. This boy had become his responsibility. But what Jonathan didn't know was that helping Malik would come at a cost, because Malik's past wasn't finished with him yet. And soon, dark forces from the boy's life would come knocking at Jonathan's door. Jonathan thought life might finally give him peace after meeting Malik. But he was wrong, because when you take in a child running from darkness, the darkness doesn't just disappear. It follows. That evening, Jonathan and Malik sat on the balcony of the penthouse, looking over the glowing city lights. Malik's small voice broke the silence. Do you think people like me can ever have a normal life? Jonathan placed a hand on his shoulder. You're more normal than you think, Malik. You're brave, stronger than most men I know. For the first time, Malik let himself smile. But deep down, Jonathan knew this was only the beginning, because soon, the very man Malik ran away from would appear. And when he did, Jonathan would be forced to make a choice that would change both of their lives forever. The next day, Jonathan called one of his lawyers. He wanted to explore legal guardianship for Malik, but the lawyer's voice was hesitant. Jonathan, this isn't simple. Without records, documents, or proof of neglect, it's complicated. The authorities might just send him back to the only family they can trace. Jonathan's jaw tightened. He knew exactly what that meant. Sending Malik back to the very monster who had hurt him. No, Jonathan said firmly. I won't let that happen. But destiny doesn't bend so easily. That night, while Malik was asleep, the intercom to Jonathan's building buzzed. "Sir," the doorman's voice came through. "There's a man here. He says he's looking for his nephew." Jonathan's blood ran cold. His worst fear had arrived, and when Jonathan went down to the lobby, the face that greeted him was pure evil. The man was tall, rough-looking, his eyes bloodshot, his hands shaking slightly, whether from rage or alcohol, Jonathan couldn't tell. "I'm here for the boy," the man growled. "Malik, he's mine." Jonathan stared him down. "He's not yours. Not anymore." The man smirked. "Legally, he is. You think you can just keep a kid that isn't yours? You rich folks think money gives you the right to steal family?" Jonathan clenched his fists, but his voice remained calm. "Family doesn't hurt children. Family doesn't abandon them." The man leaned closer, his breath reeking. "Stay out of this, or you'll regret it." Jonathan returned upstairs, heart pounding. Malik was still asleep, clutching the blanket Jonathan had given him. He looked so small, so fragile. Jonathan knew he couldn't let that man take Malik. Not now, not ever. But how long could he protect him? Because sometimes love isn't enough to fight the system. Sometimes the law itself becomes your enemy. Over the next few days, Jonathan noticed strangers lingering near his building, a car parked across the street for hours, men watching, waiting. The message was clear. Malik's uncle wasn't giving up. Jonathan doubled security. He even pulled Malik out of school before he could be enrolled. Too dangerous. But Malik noticed the tension. One night he whispered, "Are they coming for me?" Jonathan knelt beside him. "Listen to me, Malik. Nobody will hurt you while I'm here. You hear me?" The boy nodded, but tears slid down his cheeks. "I don't want to go back. Please, don't let them take me." Jonathan hugged him tight. "I promise I'll protect you with everything I have." But Jonathan was also a man of power, and power meant enemies. Word began to spread through the media. Millionaire hides homeless child in his apartment. Reporters camped outside his building. Talk shows debated whether Jonathan was a hero or a man interfering with family law. The pressure grew heavier by the day, and then the police came knocking. One evening, 2 officers stood at Jonathan's door. "Mr. Cole," one said firmly, "we have reports of a missing child. A boy named Malik. We're going to need to see him." Jonathan's heart sank. Malik stood frozen in the hallway, staring at the officers with wide, terrified eyes. The older officer knelt slightly. "Son, is this man keeping you against your will?" Malik shook his head furiously. "No! Please, don't make me go back! He's the only one who cares about me!" The officers exchanged looks. Jonathan stepped in. "You heard him. He doesn't want to go back. He's safe here." But the younger officer frowned. "It's not that simple, sir. Until the courts decide otherwise, custody belongs to the next of kin." Jonathan's voice sharpened. "The next of kin is an abuser. Do you really want to send a child back into hell?" The officers hesitated, torn between the law and what was right. Finally, the older one sighed. "For now he stays. But this will go to court." Jonathan exhaled in relief. He had bought time, but only time. That night, Jonathan couldn't sleep. He paced the living room, the city lights casting long shadows across the walls. He knew money could win court cases, but this wasn't just about winning. This was about saving a life. He looked over at Malik, asleep on the couch again. The boy's face was peaceful now, trusting. Jonathan whispered to himself, "I won't let them take you, even if it costs me everything." But what Jonathan didn't know was that Malik's uncle was preparing something far more dangerous than a courtroom battle. Something that would put both their lives at risk, and when the truth finally came out, it would shake Jonathan's world to its very core. Jonathan had promised Malik protection, but promises don't stop monsters, and Malik's uncle was done waiting. One rainy night, Jonathan was returning home when his driver noticed something unusual. A black van, parked dangerously close to the building entrance. Jonathan's instincts screamed. He rushed upstairs, only to find the apartment. "Doctor slightly open." "Malik!" he called out. Silence. Jonathan's chest tightened as he stepped inside. The living room lights flickered. Furniture overturned, and then he heard it, a muffled cry. In the corner of the room, Malik was struggling in the arms of his uncle. The man's grip was tight, his face twisted with rage. "You think you can steal my blood from me, rich boy?" the uncle roared. Jonathan froze, his heart pounded, but his voice came out steady. "Let him go! Right now!" the man sneered. "Or what? You'll buy me off with your money? That's all you people know, money. But this boy is mine." Malik's eyes were wide, pleading. "Jonathan, don't let him take me." Something inside Jonathan snapped. He stepped forward, fists clenched. "This boy is not your possession. He's not property. He's a child. And he deserves love, not chains." The uncle shoved Malik aside and lunged at Jonathan. A brutal fight broke out. Furniture crashing, glass shattering, fists flying. Jonathan wasn't a fighter, but he fought with the desperation of a man protecting his son. Finally, with one last strike, he managed to pin the man down until building security stormed in. The uncle was dragged away, cursing Jonathan's name. Malik ran into Jonathan's arms, trembling. And for the first time, Jonathan realized this boy wasn't just someone he was protecting. He was family. But the battle wasn't over. 2 days later, Jonathan stood in court. The uncle sat across from him, smirking with a court-appointed lawyer by his side. The judge's voice echoed through the courtroom. "This case concerns the custody of a minor, Malik Davis. The decision must weigh legal rights against the child's welfare," Jonathan's lawyer argued passionately. "Your Honor, Malik's uncle has a history of neglect and abuse. This man, Jonathan Cole, gave him safety, shelter, and care. Malik himself has made it clear where he feels safe." The uncle slammed, his fists on the table. "He's my blood. That's all that matters." The judge turned to Malik, who was sitting nervously in the witness chair. "Son, where do you want to live?" The room went silent. And then, in a trembling voice, Malik said something that brought tears to every eye in the courtroom. He looked at Jonathan. "Blood doesn't make you family. Love does. And Jonathan, he's the only family I've ever had." Jonathan's throat tightened. He tried to stay composed, but tears blurred his vision. The judge nodded slowly. "In light of the evidence and the child's testimony, custody will be granted to Jonathan Cole." The gavel struck. It was over. Malik was free. But the story didn't end with a legal victory, because what Jonathan did next would change countless other lives. Months passed. Malik began school, wearing clean clothes, carrying books, and walking with a confidence he had never known. Jonathan often sat in the back of classrooms, watching him answer questions, laugh with friends, live like any other child. But Jonathan's heart still carried the weight of children like Malik, those who had no one to protect them. So he made a decision. He launched a foundation in Malik's name, the Malik Project, a safe home for homeless and abused children. A place where they could heal, study, and dream without fear. And at the opening ceremony, Malik stood at the microphone looking out at a crowd of reporters, donors, and children. "My life changed," he said softly, "because one man cared, enough to stop when I was hungry. He gave me food, but more than that, he gave me hope. And now, I want every kid out there to know, you're not invisible. You matter, just like me." The crowd erupted in applause. Jonathan, standing nearby, wiped his eyes. Because sometimes, changing one child's life changes the entire world. That night, as Malik and Jonathan sat on their balcony again, looking at the same city lights where their story began, Malik leaned against him and whispered, "Do you think people like me can have a normal life now?" Jonathan smiled, pulling him close. "No, Malik. Not just normal. Extraordinary." And for the first time in his life, Malik believed it. This story isn't just about Jonathan and Malik. It's about every child who is forgotten, every child waiting for someone to see them, and maybe, just maybe, you could be that someone.